Hello, this is Roxanne Truen, the coordinator of the Michigan State University Science Festival. And we've come to the last presentation of the digital series this morning and this afternoon. And I'm excited to welcome Dr. Jen Owen from now I just lost her title. Hang on a minute, get this right. She is the director of the Michigan State Bird Observatory and the Center Coordinator for the Marsh Ecological Research Center. We're so excited you can join us. And at any time during the presentation, if you have any questions, if you would add them to our comment section on our Facebook, we will answer those throughout the presentation. So Jen, tell us a little bit how you got interested in working with bird migration.
Great. Well, thanks. First, thank you so much for hosting this. This is a great event that you're doing, and I'm excited to be a part of it. Yeah, so bird migration, well, first I should say I'm an associate professor in the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife at Michigan State University, as well as the Department of Large Animal Clinical Sciences. And one of the areas of research that I do is bird migration. And the reason I do bird migration is I fell in love with it many years ago. I actually started a fascination with birds at a very early age, which was fostered by both sets of my grandparents. And then I got my degree at University of Montana, a bachelor's degree there. And then I just started working around the country on different bird projects. And I ended up at a project down in Alabama and studying bird migration on the Gulf of Mexico. And by that point, I was hooked on bird migration and just amazed about the challenges that they face and how they overcome those challenges. I'm just in awe of bird migration. And so I've been at Michigan State since 2008. And then we started the Michigan State Bird Observatory, which was known as Burke Lake Banding Station, in 2010.
Terrific. I'm excited to see your presentation. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started?
Great. So I wanted to just share with everyone what we do and why we do some of the work and basically how we do it. So I'm going to share my screen. So it was neat because earlier I saw Dan from Waldemar's presentation, and he had the same slide here. So this is a slide that represents 118 species. So each dot on there, moving dot, is a different species. And it's based on data from citizen science. And this is eBird data. This is from observations that people had of that species. And now you can see where those species were in time and space. So as they're moving, you can see this is January in blue. We get into spring. They're getting up into the boreal, some of them boreal region. And then they start their migration to the south. And what's so amazing about birds is just some of the bird species, how far they go, that birds in the far north boreal regions can migrate all the way down into southern South America and Argentina. And this is an incredibly challenging period in a bird's annual cycle. Oops. So I did mention eBird, and I just wanted to give a plug because this is something we can all do still, even despite being contained around our home, our backyards, is contribute to citizen science, contribute as a really valuable data set through eBird. So I encourage you to visit the Cornell Lab of Ornithology website. They have a whole site on how to use eBird.
And we do have on the Science Festival website, under our digital resources, a whole section on citizen science, and that particular website from Cornell is there. So please, you can click directly on that and it'll take you over to eBird.
Great, perfect. It'll be interesting to see how many more eBird lists there might have, because I know I'm actually birding a bit more now from home. So this slide is just showing you kind of general paths that birds take, but what it's supposed to be depicting is just some of the variation in length of migration of different birds. But what I'm interested in is actually what they do along the way, because birds can't just make that flight all at once. They have to stop and they need to eat. they need food, and they stop at what are called stopover sites. And I primarily study songbirds, passerines, and they migrate at night, most of them. And I could talk about that later if people have questions. And then they'll land where there's potentially available habitat. And then they use that time to rest, to eat. They need to replenish those depleted fat stores. They need to escape predation before they can take their next leg of their journey. So what we do is at Michigan State Bird Observatory, we operate a couple bird banding stations, and the primary one at Burke Lake Banding Station, we capture birds during fall and spring migration. Our big field season is in fall, and you can find out more information on our website as well, and happy to answer questions afterwards. So this is just to show you what it looks like in the habitat of the Burke Lake Banding Station. It's a beautiful wetland, emergent shrub, wetland swamp. And we have this very fancy boardwalk. I think it's very fancy. You can say it might be rudimentary, who knows. And we have nets that are placed throughout this because birds are moving through these areas, foraging, and we have nets, they're placed, and you might be wondering what a mist net looks like. And this is a mist net. So this is, you should be able to see, well, you might not be able to see, this is the net from here all the way down to here. It's about 12 meters in length and about 3 meters high. And you might notice there's some birds in it. And there's a picture up close of the American goldfinch that were caught in this net. So birds don't see it. That's hence the name mist. It's very hard to see. They fly into it, and there's this little buckets of mesh net that they kind of fall into, and then they kind of hang out there, and then we go round and check the nets every 30 to 45 minutes. And this is a picture of a Nashville warbler on our right in a net, being very calm. And then on the left is one of our field technicians taking out a rose-breasted grosbeak. You might notice a difference in bill size. The rose-breasted grosbeak is not a fun bird to take out of a net. They also know where all the little bits of skin are to hold on to. It's a little painful. But anyway, so we extract these birds. Here's another one of our crew members. Taking out a gray catbird. You can tell because of the undertail red. And she's either going to put the bird in a bird bag or in a box. And you'll see that box. And I also have, this is like a little bird bag, and you put the bird in, and then you might just tie it like this, and then you carry it back to the banding station. It's cool. They're cotton bags, and they keep the bird calmer and cool. The bird box I'll get to shortly. So we bring it back to our banding barn or banding tent, depending on our study site, and we'll put a band on the bird. And so you might wonder what a band looks like. These are pictures of bands. They come in all different sizes because birds' legs there's a lot of variation in leg size, obviously, from the small hummingbird gets banded, although we don't band them, all the way up. You can think about geese and so forth that have very big bands. And so each bird in North America gets a band that has a unique number. It's 8 to 9 digits. And that way, if we were to recapture it, then we would know that history of that bird. Maybe someone else will recapture that bird, which is what we always want. And then we can get to see where that bird is going. Or unfortunately, it also helps because someone might recover that bird from hitting their window, or their cat that shouldn't be outdoors might take it, and so forth. But you might wonder where the bands get reported to. So all this data goes to the bird banding lab. And this website here, and I have the address down at the bottom because it's a wealth of information on this website, because you can go in and you can look at data on all the birds banded. You can see what's the oldest, let's say, red-tailed hawk ever banded, because it keeps track of all these records. So it's a really interesting source of information. So I highly recommend visiting fat. And then they are the ones that manage all that data. So if someone recaptures our bird, and we had that happen, we had one of our black and white warblers that we banded in September get recaptured at a banding station in Belize in April the following year. So it's pretty exciting. But then the bird banding lab can contact us and let us know. And this also shows you how many birds were banded. This actually screenshots just from April 15th, of about a year ago, basically. So, okay, so the slide, just point out the birds are all alive in this slide, and I know it looks weird, but what's at the top here are we took some water and we just wet the feathers on the bird's belly, and we just separated out the feathers a bit so you could see, because we look for fat, because fat is important for birds during migration. And this yellow, orange yellow, that's fat. And then you can see on this other bird here, you don't see the same sort of fat stores. So we measure that. We do it by blowing on them. It never looks always looks weird to people that are visiting. So we blow on their belly and we look for the amount of fat. And birds need to put on fat in order to make their migration. So this is huge information for us, because the bird's ability to put on fat at our study site tells us something about the quality of that stopover site, because that is absolutely essential for their successful migration. And I say hyperphagia there, and that's because birds before migration, as they prepare, they don't want to carry this much fat the rest of the year. It's not efficient. But before migration, they have to prepare, so they start eating at a very high rate. And actually more of the food that they eat is deposited in fat stores compared to other times of the year. And part of that is that they want to find enough food, and their diet changes in order to put on fat. So I'm going to see if, well, oh yeah, so first, sorry, I'm going to talk about ticks, because who doesn't want to see a bunch of ticks on a slide? So birds also carry ticks, and we look for those as well. And a tick can go anywhere on a bird, where they basically crawl to where there's no feathers, there's just skin, they latch on. But the bird can actually clear off almost all those ticks except for what's right around the head and in their ears. So this down here is a bird's ear, and you can see 2 ticks on it. And then you might see this is an engorged tick on the eye. We then remove them because we have a deticking service at our banding station. And then we put them in a vial with alcohol. And then Dr. Jean Tsao in the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife, she and her lab will identify those ticks as species. And then if it is the black-legged tick, which is the known vector for the bacteria that causes Lyme disease, they'll then test that tick to see if it has the bacteria. Yes, and so this is a vial of a lot of ticks from a bird. You can have a lot of ticks in an ear.
Wow. I did have a question that came up regarding the birds. Sharon wanted to know, do you keep and fatten up birds caught without enough fat to make their migratory way?
No, we don't actually do any manipulations that alter. We capture and we measure their fat and then release them. If a bird doesn't have that much fat, what we find is they stay at that stopover site for much longer. And then we will a lot of times recapture that bird, and then we can see if they are getting fat. And for example, we had a Swainson's thrush, which is a bird that weighs 23 grams without fat. We caught it around 25 grams, and about a week later, we caught it again at 50 grams. So clearly, it was finding food and got very fat, very, very pudgy. Any other questions that I should answer? Is that good for now? I can move on.
I think that's good for now. We can move on. Thanks.
So we also have to weigh the bird. We put them in a tube head first. This is a very safe way to weigh the bird so that their wings are protected against their body. The weight is extremely important because we may not be able to see changes in fat when we recapture a bird, but we most certainly will see changes in their weight. And then this will go. it doesn't seem to want to go. But that would be a picture of a white-throated sparrow flying, flying out of that tube as we release it. And then what you'll notice here is these are all the tubes, different sizes for different birds. It's not, I know it looks like it's a Starbucks. And then here is different bird bags. So you can see these are a lot of birds that are hanging there waiting to get banded. And then down here, you can see a bunch of different pieces of paper with different colors on them. Those are our poop samples. So one of the things we're really interested in is knowing what the birds eat, because that tells us a lot about the quality, the habitat, what do birds want. And so we do study that, and let's share you how we do that. So I told you about that bird box. So in that bird box was a lot of white paper at one point. We put the birds in there, and then we hope they leave a sample for us. And they are typically eating in fall, I should say, fruit. So even a bird that eats primarily insects at other times of the year switches to fruit during fall. One, because it's abundant, it's high in energy, has a lot, the macronutrients they need, has the fat, it has antioxidants. And so they'll eat a lot of fruit. And we have a lot of fruiting shrubs on our not our website, but on our study site. So how do we tell? Well, first, these are some of the shrubs that we have. These are pictures from plants on our study site. We have native species primarily. We have dogwoods up here. We have common spicebush, another native down here. And then we have, this is a common elderberry, high bush cranberry, and then a non-native here is our buckthorn. And so we know what those colors should look like by smearing those fruit on paper. And then we take a sample from birds. Oh, and I was going to show you, I happen to have some poop samples right here by me. You never know. And you can see different colors, hopefully. They come in all these different colors. So this is true bird art. And then we can actually so they look, here's a rainbow we have of different samples. That's 5 different poop samples from birds, just a picture of it. And then we know, for the most part, we know where that sample what they were eating to produce that sample. So on the far right is common spicebush. And then we have dogwood, buckthorn, high bush cranberry. We're not sure about that one as much. And then common elderberry. And I have an undergraduate, Zach Spodek, who's actually genetically validating this with Dr. Kim Scribner, who's in the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife in his lab. So I wanted to, I guess I should point out, if you're wondering what they eat like, spicebush is a huge, very important plant. It's a native plant, and birds eat more spicebush relative compared to its availability than other species. I should just point out, normally we are a station that's open to the public. We want to share our science with everyone and let them see how we capture the birds, how we process them. So we get large groups when you can have large groups. We won't be doing that this spring. We hope we can do it in the fall. We do it for people all ages. And then what we do is use the visitors as launching pads for the birds. So we might take a bird and we place it on the person's hand, and then the bird can fly off from their hand. So this is a pretty special experience to have a bird on your hand, and if you're lucky, it might stay there, like this ruby-crowned kinglet. And I just wanted to end with a couple things people can do from their own backyard or the home to witness and experience bird migration, but I thought I'd stop and see if there's any questions first.
We have one question from Alyssa's son. He wants to know, how long does it usually take for a bird to migrate, and what is the average total distance they travel?
Well, There is no average total distance, I should say, because the variation in distance that birds fly is enormous. So we can have birds that just migrate from the base of a mountain to the top of the mountain. We can have birds that migrate from Michigan to Mississippi. We can have birds that migrate from northern Canada all the way to the southern tip of South America. And then we can have the Arctic tern, which basically goes from one pole to the other pole. And so it's a huge variation in migratory distance. And then I forgot the first question though, sorry.
How long does it usually take?
Oh, that varies. So one of the things that's really important is actually suitable habitat. If there's not good stopover habitat where a bird can put on fat and rest, that will slow the bird down. They won't be able to meet the requirements they need to fly, and that delays them. And this is particularly important in the spring because they need to get here, get north, they need to set up their breeding sites and start breeding in order to get a successful clutch of and hatch bird eggs by the end of the season and before they have to leave. So it varies. I can give you a couple concrete things. If a bird was going to leave from the north side of the Gulf of Mexico, say from Alabama, and fly across the Gulf of Mexico, which yes, they do, to the Yucatan Peninsula, it takes about a Swainson's thrush 30 hours to do. So it is a huge variation. It's hard to answer. Yeah, but good question.
So I guess if they're flying across the Gulf, then they don't stop for those 30 hours. They actually fly 30 hours straight.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
So most though, like here, what we get is birds will they depart after sunset. So they'll take off about 30 minutes after sunset and they'll fly for maybe 5 hours, and then they land. And they're not necessarily choosing a place to land. That's they just land somewhere kind of mid-morning, maybe 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And then they may sleep a bit and then they wake up and they start eating, and they may leave the next night or they may leave a week from then, depending on their ability to find food. If the stopover site isn't good, then they may just go to another place.
All right, we have about 7 minutes left.
Okay.
I don't know if you're done with your presentation. We do have a few more questions.
Yeah,
but
I'll take questions.
Okay. Alyssa's daughter, who's 6 years old, wants to know what your favorite bird is.
I get that every single time. It's funny. It sometimes varies. The bird that got me excited about birds, the first one, you have to look it up in a bird book, is the scarlet tanager. So look that up. It's beautiful. But my favorite bird is albatross, great black-browed albatross specifically, but I just love all of their amazing, unique features. So.
And then we have another question from Rebecca. She wants to know, would you recommend people plant natives like spice bush in their yard?
Yes. There's a great way to actually increase the number of migratory birds and habitat in your own backyard, and it is by planting native fruit-bearing shrubs, dogwoods, the spice bush. Avoid non-native plants like honeysuckles and buckthorn. Spice bush, though, you have to talk with your nursery where you're getting the plants, because they're dioecious, which means that they're male plants and female plants. So you want to make sure you get both, or otherwise you're not going to have any fruit. So.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah.
Sharon wants to know, do you encourage bird feeders, or should we plant fruit for the birds I
think you should do both. Bird feeders are amazing. They are a great way to connect us to wildlife. There's actually Project Feeder Watch through Cornell. So right now you can collect data and help people learn more about birds. So I have a bird feeder right now. I absolutely love bird feeders. So yes, as long as you keep them clean, you just got to keep them clean. And if, yeah, they're great.
All right. I think that's it on the questions right now. If you want to wrap up your presentation, I have 6 minutes left.
So I just wanted to, just a couple of things that everyone could study bird migration, and they can do it from inside their home to outside their home. And I just wanted to share with you a couple ways people can do it. One is just moon watching, because I said these birds are migrating at night. So at night with a full moon, if you took a telescope or spotting scope that's at least 30x and look on the face of the moon, you can actually see silhouettes of birds as they fly in front of the face of the moon. And that's actually one of the ways that people have studied bird migration, to look at how many birds are passing through the light in front of the light of the moon. And then another, well, I mean, you want to do that during bird migration period. The other way is just to go out during that period, the spring, and just listen at night. If it's really quiet out, you might be able to hear the night calls of birds as they fly overhead, and they have very distinctive night calls. The other is looking at the radar. If you don't want to go outside, you can sit in front of your computer and look at next generation radar. So there's radar stations like weather stations across the country. And here you can see rain, as we normally would look on these radar. But all of these other kind of circles blooming out, those are birds. So that is at night. This is looking at migration. The sun is setting, and each one of those represents a sort of a movement, an exodus of birds as they take off for their migration flight. And so you can actually see this at night and see how big of a migration it is. And I highly recommend this website, the Birdcast, because it'll actually tell you, you can track it in live, and you can see where is there a lot of birds moving tonight. So we do it all the time because we want to know, like, is it going to be a good morning tomorrow or not? So I highly recommend that as a site. And just again, this is, if you want more information, when we open up, we are open to the public. We do lots of programs and so forth.
All right. I have one final question. I know you talked about banding birds. What other information, is it all about how they migrate, or do you learn any other information from banding birds?
You learn a lot. You can, it depends on when you're banding them. You can connect populations, so you can actually get an idea of their sort of where a breeding population of birds, where are they wintering, and that tells you, so you can understand if there's changes in that population, where you need to be looking to see why there might be changes or declines. You can tell a breeding status of a bird that you can't tell from binoculars. So whether or not they're sitting on eggs or not, the female will get a brood patch. You can tell their condition. We can do lifespan. There's a lot of different things. And that's what's neat is if you go to the Bird Banding Lab website, they'll actually tell you all of the different reasons why people should band birds.
Fantastic. Are we doing on time? I have 2 minutes. All right, I think I'm going to take this last 2 minutes to thank our sponsors of the Science Festival. Even though we didn't have our live, they do help us with our digital version. So I just want to give a shout out, if you don't mind, to our sponsors, and that would be University Outreach and Engagement from MSU, WKAR, Lansing State Journal, WILX Channel 10, the DART Foundation, FRIB, National Superconducting Cyclotron Lab, Dean Transportation, College of Ag and Natural Resources, College of Natural Science, Michigan State University Research and Innovation, Foresight Group, College of Communication Arts and Sciences, Michigan STEM Network, MSU Federal Credit Union, Michigan State University Libraries, and College of Education from Michigan State University. And then we had supporters who put ads in our program booklet, which look beautiful, by the way. And they are Board of Water and Light, Greater Lansing Convention and Visitors Bureau, College of Osteopathic Med, College of Social Science, Department of Forestry, Department of Geography, Lyman Briggs College, and the Michigan State Bird Observatory. So thank you, Dr. Owen, for supporting our festival. We really appreciate it. And with that, I think that ends the day of science. Look for us at sciencefestival.msu.edu for other programs. We have things happening every Saturday and then some things sprinkled throughout the week. So everyone stay safe and stay home.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jen.